Okay, gentlemen, Parshas Vayechi. Yaakov is giving brachas to his children. He's about to die. And he's giving a bracha, each one of which will express something about their strengths, about their job. And he speaks to Dan. Dan yadin amo ke'achad shiftei Yisrael. He will judge his nation like one of the judges of Israel. He will be like a snake. He done nachash alei derech, shfifon alei orach, like a snake in the path. Hanoshech ikvei sus, who bites the heel of the horse, vayipol roch v'achar, and his rider falls off and gets killed. And done lishuascha kivisi adonai. For your salvation, I long, I hope, and I yearn. What happened over here? He has a nevuah that there's going to be a son, a grandson, a great-grandson in the family of Dan called Shimshon. Samson the mighty, Shimshon Hagibor, Shimshon the powerful one. Such a fascinating story in Shoftim, so difficult to understand. For 40 years, the Jews are persecuted by the Plishtim. You know, today the Palestinians call themselves Palestinians because they want to say to the Plishtim that used to be here all those generations ago, but they weren't actually Muslims. It was a different nation. The Plishtim, they were in Gaza. That's where they were located. And for 40 years, they were terrorizing the Jewish people. And Shimshon, his mother, has a visit from the Malach, tells her you're going to have a son who will begin to save the Jewish people. He needs to be a Nazir from the time he is born. Could never have any grapes or grape products. He has to cut his hair. He can never cut his hair. And he will begin to save the Jewish people. And Shimshon is this mighty figure who judges the Jewish people and keeps the peace for 20 years. The Plishtim are terrified of him. The Gemara, the language that the Torah uses about him is incredible. Why is he called Shimshon? He's like the sun. In what way he's like the sun? Just like the sun provides life for the entire earth, Shimshon did that for the Jewish people. Generally, you have a person who leads a nation. He has an entire core of people working for him. He has assistants and deputies and officers and Shimshon and armies and generals and captains. Shimshon by himself wiped out thousands upon thousands of Plishtim. No army, no officers, no helpers. He was the judge who kept the peace amongst the nation by himself. No help, no officers. Yaakov Avinu sees it as be a figure like this mighty, powerful figure, a Nazir, a Kadosh. And he says he's going to be Mashiach. Yaakov Avinu thinks that Shimshon is going to bring the Geula to the world. He's going to fix everything that's broken. That's what Mashiach does, fixes everything that's broken. And then he sees that ultimately what happens with Shimshon. He's on top of the world. He's on top of Klal Yisrael. Chazal say his eyes lead him astray. He marries a Plishti woman. And he falls for her. He's megayer her. But she wasn't a real convert. She was a real convert. She did the laws to be a convert, but her heart wasn't really there. And she keeps begging him to talk about where the source of his great strength is, because he is inhumanly strong. He was an army by himself. It's not possible. And Shimshon, it was because of his Kedusha, and it was because of the Nazirus, and every time he did some kind of mighty feat, it says that Hashem's Ruach comes upon him, and suddenly he's capable of killing 3,000 people, 1,000 people with the jawbone of a donkey. Really powerful. Crazy events of strength, picking up the entire gates of the city on his shoulders and moving them. And he keeps telling her answers. And she keeps saying, you don't love me because you're lying to me, because she called him in the middle of the night to push to my ear, and he'd jump up, and all the things that he was saying to do to him that would take away his strength he would in a second, he'd just break the chains that held him. She's like, you don't really love me. And she keeps working on him. And eventually he says, my strength is in this hair. The hair is the indication that he's a Nazir, that he exists between him and God. And she cuts his hair. And she calls the Plishtim in. He said everything that's in his heart to me. Come get him. And they come get him. And he's like, okay, business as usual. He didn't realize that Hashem had abandoned him because he had strayed in this way. And they took him. And they made a joke out of him. The pasuk tells us that they took him, they tied him up, they poked out his eyes, they took out his eyes, vayinakru es einov, they brought him down to Aza, they tied him in chains, and his job was like to run the mill in the jail. And his hair started to grow again. And they all gathered, all the officers and the most powerful people of the Plishtim gathered to make a feast and a party to give thanks to their avodah zarah, to their god, to their idol, Dagon, that they got Shimshon in their power. They gather, they have this giant arena, a giant stadium, thousands upon thousands of people, 3,000 people just on the roof. And they're praising their God that he gave Shimshon over into their hands, the one who was destroying our entire country. And they're all happy, and they said, bring Shimshon out to entertain us. He's going to be the clown. He's going to be the court jester. Bring him out to make us laugh. And he can't see Shimshon. He's brought out by the person who leads him. And the person takes him, the young man takes him, and he's like, entertain the crowd, and he has to make them laugh. Shimshon, the mightiest man in the world, the warrior, the judge. He's listed in the Rambam's list of people who carried the Mesorah of the Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu down to Klal Yisrael. He's one of the links in the chain. This great Talmud Chacham who strayed, who sinned, who made a mistake. And there's a lot of deep explanation necessary to understand where the mistakes were. It's not the simple story it appears. You have to learn Chazal. But this man has now become the joke and the laughingstock of the entire Plishti nation. And they put him between the pillars of the building. And Shimshon says to the child who's bringing him, to the boy who's bringing them, let me just hold on to the poles so I should be able to rest for a moment. I'll lean on them. Thousands and thousands and thousands of men and women in the building, all looking and laughing at him. Vayikra Shimshon el Hashem. Shimshon calls to God. Vayomar, and he says, Adonai Elohim, Zochreini no, Vichazkeini no, Achapam. Remember me and give me strength. Again. Achapam hazeh Elohim. Let me take revenge for one of my eyes from these Plishtim. I'm going to take the other eye, whatever I saw, with all the good I did with that, I'll take that for Olam Haba. But let me have this moment. And Shimshon takes the two beams over there, the two supports of the building, and he leans on them, one in the right, one in the left hand. Vayomer Shimshon, Tamos nafshi in Plishtim. Let me die with the Plishtim. Vayet bekoach, and he leaned with all of his might. Vayipol habayis, and the entire stadium fell. Al hasronim v'al kol ha'om asher bo, all the people who were in it, and he died with them. Vayu amesim asher hemis b'moso, and the amount of people he killed with his death, rabim mamei asher mesim b'chayo, hemis b'chayo, more than he killed in his entire life. And for another 20 years, they had peace from the Plishtim. 40 years of peace from the Plishtim, because the Plishtim was still afraid because of the remnant of what happened with Shimshon. Yaakov Avinu sees this, and he says, Lishuascha kivisi Adonai. We mentioned this, we've been speaking about this in the power of hope that we give sometimes before Mincha. This concept of kivisi Hashem, kivisi, I put my hope in you, I yearn for you, I long for you. Shimshon's entire power was so extraordinary. He had this koyach that Yaakov thought he was Mashiach because he was so connected to God, that all of the strength that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to bring to the world, so to speak, like the Shemesh, flowed through this single individual. And then he strayed, and he went the wrong way, and he made a mistake. And it was terrible cost to him. He could have been Mashiach. Yaakov Avinu predicted that. And then it all fell. It all fell. And Yaakov Avinu says, but I put my hope in you, Hashem. Why? Because no matter how far the person falls, this koach, this power of putting all of our hope in Hashem, it's stronger than regular davening. It's stronger than regular mitzvos. You have to do all those things. But there's a special direct line that to the extent that we desire to have that relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to that extent a Yeshua, salvation could come. To the extent that we feel everything's fine. What do you mean? I got my food, I got my room, I got my family, I'm fine. To that extent, we're not even capable of receiving salvation because we think it's okay. To the extent that we realize how barren and empty and small we are, and the desire to be more and to be great and to be connected, that power, says the Medrash, of kivui, of that hope I wanted so badly, is the hope that brings us the salvation itself. The geula itself comes from the amount that we put our hope and trust in Hashem and ask for it and tell him that we trust him for this with all of our might and all of our being. Shimshon said, what's the difference? I'm practically, when I strayed so far, what's the difference between me and the Pelishtim? Except the fact that I have this bris milah, I have this reminder that we can always come back. No matter how far we go, we can always come back. We can always come back if we want it. The whole difference sometimes between us and the world outside of us, because our actions sometimes stray so far from what they're supposed to be. And the world outside, their actions straight. So what's the difference between us and them? The difference is that we have a place within us where we want so badly to be connected to Hashem and to be good and to do what's good. We put our longing in Hashem. It creates this kav, kivui, hope. Lishuascha kivisi Hashem. With that power, when Shimshon had this tefillah, Chazal tell us, Hashem answered him. And that's the answer for what we're going through, and that's the answer for our lives. That's the answer to being able to live now during these times. Lishuascha kivisi Adonai.